Hi, my name is Nancy A. Shenker, and I have had a very long and circuitous career. I currently am the founder and CEO of a company called The On Switch, which is a marketing branding company. But primarily these days, I'm a writer. I'm a senior editor and researcher for an online magazine called Street Fight, where I write about multi-location brands. And I also have my own podcast and a blog and a travel website. So I do lots and lots of things.
I love it. And Nancy, what is your secret to a good life?
My secret to a good life is just never giving up and remaining resilient, and just dealing with all of the random shit that gets thrown your way by the universe. It was really great last night seeing Demi Moore win her first Golden Globe at the age of 62. Really, as a woman over 60, makes me realize that I'm not only not done yet, but I may just be getting started.
Oh, I love that. So take me back a little bit to maybe a time where you did feel like giving up.
Oh,
Right?
there've been many, many, many times. You don't get to 68, almost 69 years old without being kicked in the head a bunch of times. When I was in my early 30s, I had a benign lung tumor and lost 2/3 of my right lung. And then my dad died within a year of that. Soon after starting my own business, I had a giant fibroid and had to have a hysterectomy and spend some time out of work. And then during the recession, I lost about $250,000 in my business, which is very, very humbling. So lots of times along the way, I've been hit with these financial challenges, physical challenges, life challenges, which makes it very easy at those times to just say, what's the point of going on? But then you realize that it's just a speed bump in this long, weird road of life. Not to get
Yeah.
too philosophical, but
That's where we go on this show.
I know I feel
It's
like
all
bursting into the sun will come out tomorrow, but it does. But you have to coax it out. It doesn't. Yes, there is a sunrise and a sunset, but once you get into that dark, dark place where you don't believe that you'll ever get out of the hole, that's the time when you really have to start clawing your way out.
and how do you coax the sunrise out every morning?
You develop a ritual. I've taken to getting up out of bed and just being grateful that I could see and hear and all my limbs move, and even saying something lame to myself like, yippee, I'm alive and I'm healthy, and looking at yourself in the mirror and not concentrating on the wrinkles or the bags under your eyes and just saying, oh, there's some good stuff coming up today or this week or this month. And always keeping one eye on the future and thinking about all those people who've been through different versions of hell and have emerged wiser and better and more successful.
Who comes to mind?
Yeah, someone like Robert Downey Jr. If you're looking for like a Hollywood example, I have a lot of Hollywood examples. You have people who've started their first business as when they were older. The woman who wrote the Harry Potter series. There are always these people who are on the edge of financial ruin. You read stories about people living in cars or being in prison and then coming out to do great things. Not that I ever want to be in prison or be buried in quicksand, but it happens. People lose limbs and go on to with sports championships. So
Yeah. I find myself comparing myself to other people. And thankfully, I've done enough self work to recognize it really quickly. I will be on Instagram and I'll see somebody has done something special. And my first reaction used to be like, oh, man, like I'm so far behind, right? Like I haven't gotten that thing. I haven't achieved what they're achieving. And I think that if you take a second, like you're suggesting, and you just stop and like think about all the stuff that they've probably gone through to get that right, imagine a couple of ruin and hardship along the way, then it like you said, it humanizes them to the point where you can be inspired by it rather than deflated by it.
Right. And you don't really know what anybody is really going through because depression and suicidal ideation is invisible. And every time you read about an influencer or somebody in their 40s or 50s committing suicide, you say, wow, like, did anybody even know the depths of despair that they were in at that point in their life? And I've been there, and I didn't go around, calling my friends going, I'm thinking of killing myself today. Because
Mhm.
when you're in that place, you're not making public announcements.
How do you get out of it? Because I've been there too. I've been there to the point of being hospitalized, right? I've been in that spot where people were really worried about me, and thankfully I'm a very outspoken, very passionate person, so like mine was a little bit more obvious. I was talking about it. But when you get to those points where you're dark, how do you snap yourself out of it and get back on track?
Well, you can't really snap yourself out of it. You need to find that one person or people, a therapist, a really close family member, a close friend, preferably somebody who's been there. It's almost like I call it the dark cloud. And, I think it goes hand in hand with being creative and being passionate. And sometimes we have very high highs and very low lows. And just, as you age, you start to recognize when you're going into that spiral or the cloud is rolling in, and you take care of it before it covers your entire head and body.
Mm. My dark cloud, I've realized, starts coming on Sunday night because I get over when I think about the enormity of the mountains that I'm trying to move, and my wife calls me out all the time on it. I'm like, man, why am I feeling so funny? She's like, it's Sunday night. Like you're thinking about the week. You need
Right.
to go journal, walk outside, do your routine so that you can get out of it. What do you do when the clouds are rolling in? What do
Oh,
you
yeah,
do?
you mentioned journaling, that's key. I have a old-fashioned notebook and a gel pen, and I make a list of all the good things that happened that week. Or I also have 2 daughters and 3 grandkids, and suicide is one of the most selfish acts. I mean, it's not that people are thinking rationally when they're leaving this earth, but I could never, at this point in my life, leave my grandkids without a grandmother or my daughters without a mother. So you kind of teleport yourself into that space because it's easy to say, well, nobody will really miss me when I'm gone, but they will miss you when you're gone. And why would you leave them with that burden to carry the rest of their lives? Better to have a depressed parent or grandparent than
Yeah.
no parent or grandparent.
Right. I remember I was diving really deep into stoicism last year, and there was a talk that somebody gave reflecting on the practice of imagining that like your kid is gone. All of a sudden they were taking an accident. It's really morbid, terrible thing
Right.
that they had, and they have you sit and visualize it as a meditation. They just have you think about the thing as if it's not in your life and it was in your life at some point. And I remember I was laying there with my son. We had just finished reading a story and we were just going to bed. And I started to feel that. And I just thought of like walking into his room with no one in there and realizing, like, oh my gosh, I got to clean all, I got to get rid of all this stuff. How can I ever get rid of this stuff? And it sent me. I cried for like 45 minutes just thinking, like, oh my
Right.
gosh,
And so if you think about it in reverse, that's the pain that you never want him to feel. The other thing that I do, Eric, is I made a list in Google Docs of 100 things that make me happy. And some of them are like big things like, tropical vacations. And other things are like really silly little things like canned pineapple and natural juice, like a really good ice cream. And so, they're not all food things, some of them like knitting or writing, but to have that list handy and to just say, let me pick something off of the 100 list. And if that doesn't work, I'll pick something else. And it works.
I'm one of the most neurotic journalers that I know. And so I've got 13 of these bad boys filled and front to end. And I've been recently going through Jack Canfield's meditation, success principles, whatever you want to call them. And kind of in that same vein, but different, because I want to do that now. I need this list of 100 things that make
Oh,
me happy.
yeah, and it's such a just even making the list and challenging yourself to
Hard.
get to 100 is in and of itself a great exercise, and you've met your match as far as journaling OCD. I have an 8.5 by 11 journal that's divided into 3 columns: self-care, passions, and things that make me money, and every day I make sure that there's at least one thing in each of those 3 columns, and then at night before I go to sleep, I have my mood journal where I write about good things that happen that day and things that are giving me, as I call them, the utchkis, things that, like your Sunday night weirdness. And I say, all right, if I'm feeling a little off, what was it that triggered that? And how could I avoid that in the week or days ahead?
Oh, that reflection is great. I got a gift for Christmas, kind of similar to that. It's this journal over here. Priority of the day, I am grateful for. Daily affirmation, highlight of the day, what I learned, and then share a specific moment from your childhood that brings you joy when you think about it. Oh, how ironic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
love
So
that.
it's just every single day you put the date and you write this stuff down. And that's been great because I feel those emotions. But one of the ones that I did with Jack Canfield was list 100 accomplishments in your life.
That's great.
And it's hard. You get your first like 30, you crush it. Even like I learned to ride a bike. I graduated from high school. I graduated from college, whatever. So he says to start with separate your life into thirds and then do 3 things for each of those things and just start there with 9. So I have like I won the bike rodeo when I was in first grade. And I have this plaque that I just hold it and I just love on my little plaque and man, I just marrow out of that experience. There was a time I was second grade. I got to do the morning announcements as well for the school. Oh,
Oh,
so
yeah, and
good.
I was the director of The Wizard of Oz, and I got to do all the casting,
Mm.
and, like, again, it's one of those things that if you really, really challenge yourself, you can to 100. You just have to put it aside for a little while and get back to it. I mentioned earlier, as a woman over 60, it's especially hard because the playbook for that hasn't really been written yet. When I was in high school, academically very sound, but I really liked the arts. Almost went to art school instead of college, was always a really strong writer and storyteller. And then went to college and there was all this pressure to be a professional. It was the go-go 80s. I rose up the corporate ranks to become a C-level executive. And it's like, oh, good. This is, what I was, and 2 kids and great house and great car. And I was miserable. And I had checked all the boxes that I was supposed to check. But it's like, okay, why aren't I happy now? And then I started my own business and made a bunch of other changes in my then it gets really, really tough because you realize that these goals that you had set of being like the holy grail of accomplishment, there really is no there. And you can't, above all, you compare yourself to other women. Like there are all of these like, over 50, over 60 coaches right now who are like Botox to the hilt and, super skinny and wearing high heels and, talking about becoming a boss babe and positive thinking. And, I really try to keep it real, Eric. And I think that's one of the reasons why you and I vibe, where it's like, nope, and I don't on and on about, menopausal changes and mood swings and hot flashes and, saggy boobs. I just say like this is that I am at 69, and I shouldn't age off that quickly. 68, almost 69. I'll be 69 on February 10th, which so maybe by the time this airs. But really just learning to embrace the you that's inside and how far you've come, as opposed to comparing yourself to these unrealistic images.
Do you think because goal setting is one of the things that we talk a lot about. Or, obviously like I've been journaling, I write down my goals voraciously, but it is clear now that it's the pursuit of the goals that matters at all. Just the whole thing is just related to the pursuit. And if you're caught up, if you're getting of it, then you don't get any of it. You-
Exactly. Like looking at my 3-column chart, I'll tell you what's on my list for today. Cardio, done, check. 30 minutes on the bike, no biggie. That was an easy one. That's my self care. and I'm meeting a girlfriend for dinner. So I actually have two things in that column. Then I'm on the board of a nonprofit. I posted something about one of their events. I got my podcast schedule together and I wrote an article for the business magazine that I write for. So you're not talking about splitting the atom. You're talking about little steps that get you closer to whether it's a goal that you set or a goal that appears. Like you never really know, you know, I love the quote from Monty Python. No one expects a Spanish Inquisition, but it's the positive version of that, where all of a sudden somebody will call or an opportunity will fall in your lap. And there's no system you could possibly follow that would predict that happening. And it just does. And you start to realize as you get older, the power of random events, like even how you and I met, which I think started with like a random LinkedIn message that may not have even come from you. It may have come from a bot, but you and I have, vibed and talked about a lot of different things. And I think impacted each other's lives in ways that we would never have expected. So it's the belief in not planning for it, just knowing that it'll eventually something will pop up.
Talk to me about the experience losing the $250,000. So
Oh,
what
man.
happened?
Don't make me relive that one. I mean, I thought that I was super smart having worked in corporate my whole life and gotten through a bunch of recessions and downturns at major money center bank. So I'm like, oh, well, I'm a C-level executive. I can do contingency planning. I worked for a company that was in the event business. We survived 9/11. But it's very, very, very different when you're an entrepreneur and it's your money, and it's your clients. And I had two clients declare bankruptcy. And so retainer money that I was expecting just didn't come in because I didn't have a contingency plan. And I had signed a fairly expensive lease and hired a bunch of people. And, the lesson I learned from that is that, in fact, the pandemic was actually a time for me because I had survived one tsunami of bad shit. So if I had it to do all over again, which I don't, and I won't, but I would have, let the people who worked for me go and would have shut down the office. And I think and you have to see it with businesses way, way, way bigger than mine. I find it ironic that now I write about bankruptcies for large retail chains. I'm like, oh, I only lost $250,000. These are companies that have lost millions, if not billions of dollars and fired thousands and thousands of workers. So, the difference is when it happens on a micro scale and it's you and your money, it's devastating.
So how did you get out of it?
I used a home equity line to pay off the debt and then, just chipped away at it and made some major business decisions, blew up the company, took it down to the studs, and then slowly rebuilt it in a very different way. And now I manage my expenses way differently than I did in the past. When I hear of companies that get a round of funding and then they all of a sudden, get a beautiful office with their name on the door and hire thousands of people, I'm like, no, stop, don't do that. Operate lean,
Lean. Yeah.
lean.
Nancy, where can everyone find you?
The best way to find me is on my Instagram, which is at the On Switch, which is the name of my marketing company. And in the link tree that's there are links out to all of my other things that I do. And I am launching a personal brand in February. So stay tuned for that. The announcement will be made at the On Switch. So you'll be able to see the big reveal when it comes.
Hell yes. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Oh, thank you, Eric. You're terrific.
This has been the Pulse Ox podcast. Please, if you found this episode valuable, give us a like on Spotify and share it with a friend.